We've got a varied audience. We've got some people with years of experience. We've got some people that are new to the business. So let's start with the first question. What are the most important components of a successful buy here, pay here business? So we all understand it's a capital-intensive business, but the reality is you've got to keep enough liquidity and flexibility to be able to react to the things that are going to happen in your local environment. And no one is smart enough to know what is going to happen tomorrow, so you've got to leave yourself some financial flexibility. Alan, what do you think?
Well, I think there's a lot of things.
Yeah.
Personnel.
Okay.
That's a big one.
Okay.
Hire really good people. Number two, have a good accounting system in place, whether it be technology or just a system or a process or a good controller. Ken and I both have seen a lot of businesses fail as a result of not having good accounting systems. And that, I mean, that's not necessarily software related. I'm talking about people. We know people that don't have controllers. That's a problem. When you need to go get a line of credit, you need to get some money from the bank, they're going to expect you to have financial statements. If you don't have financial statements, you're not going to get a loan. So I would say that's two pretty key.
Totally agree. Absolutely, totally agree. I think, your financial systems are extremely important. They're important for another reason. If, for instance, you're borrowing capital, you'll find that the best capital providers that are in the business have pretty high standards about what you have to report. And so you've got to make sure that your systems and processes generate that information and generate it accurately. And that's a two-edged sword. You've got to have the right systems. But one of the things I see, and I'm going to ask you to comment, Alan, is that in most operations we see, you have a minimum wage person key punching all of the information into the system. And they're putting all this data in that you're going to amortize contracts with, you're going to make all your decisions with, and nobody is checking the information. Nobody is even looking at it. The general manager is busy doing what general managers do, and here's this poor little girl or guy inputting this stuff with 6 other duties, and we wonder why the data isn't perfect when it comes out. Alan, is the data perfect with all the customers that you see out there? No mistakes, no typos, anything like that?
Never.
Never.
Right. We convert systems all over the country, probably 50 different systems we've converted. Right. And data is a serious problem.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times, you guys put all your trust in these systems and you expect them to be perfect. And although that's the desire of every software manufacturer out there, the reality of the situation is they're not all perfect. So one of the things that I think is really important is that you audit what comes out of that software. Excellent. And that you put systems in place for actually auditing the data that you get out, because ultimately it's your responsibility. So have y'all heard about something called the CFPB? Everybody heard of them yet? Anybody? CFPB stands for Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. They're a new government 1,000 employee entity that has been charged with basically managing the finance industry, mortgage, consumer, payday lending, auto. So there's going to be a lot of people paying attention to you that in the past haven't paid attention. So it's going to become even more imperative that you use really good documentation, really good forms, and less is more. So a lot of times, your friend gives you a form and you think it's great, it really helps you out. The problem with that is that form can conflict with 3 other ones that you're using. And the number one, if you ever talked to a lawyer, plaintiff's lawyer especially, the number one thing that will get you sued is forms. So assume nothing. Have someone in your dealership, appoint them as a compliance officer or whatnot, randomly pull 3, 4, 5 deals a month, 10 deals, and audit the deal from end to end.
I think along those lines, not only getting your documentation right, as we've stressed during this show and my show last month, but if your data that's in the computer is screwed up and you're not amortizing the contracts properly, you're opening yourself up to huge class action liability. Alan and I know about that because a few years ago we had a large class action lawsuit in Texas where over $1 million was spent just in the deposition process. And it all started very small and then grew like a snowball because they found some errors in the way some of the contracts were being amortized, and they just, kept going until the people who had arbitration agreements, and that's something that all of you should consider if you don't have one, where you don't have to go to court to settle a dispute, but they give you the rights to arbitrate it out. Those people got out of the class action lawsuit, but the point is, nobody was checking the data, nobody realized there were errors. They just thought that if it came out of the computer, it was right. So get your data right, make sure that your contracts do what your software is doing. And I think that's another problem. The tendency is just go buy some contracts, whether it fits your business or not. It's got to fit what you're doing, and you've got to make sure that what you're programmed to do is what your contracts actually say. Alan, what do you guys do to help make sure that the two are lined up?
Well, first of all, it's ultimately on their shoulders because there's varying contracts. You could have different amortization schedules depending on what you're doing. So if you're doing some secondary lending, you might have a simple interest contract. If you're doing internally, you may be doing a pre-computed contract, or you might be using a simple interest contract as well. But I think the important thing to talk about with forms is a lot of people will go out and they'll say, well, I'm going to use up this stack of documents until I'm done.
Right.
Okay? Well, laws don't have to change for forms to change. Right. And that's a misunderstanding. A lot of providers now are using electronic documents. A lot of your software providers are probably using electronic documents. That is ultimately the best way to go, and especially if those people are paying for regular audits of those forms, because what happens is it's an interpretation of law that changes those forms. It's not always the law. And so that's a never-ending thing. And so your job as a new business in the lending world, you need to look at yourself like you're Bank of America, because you're really no different. You're acquiring contracts, whether they be through new sales or through a related finance company or whatever, and you're financing these contracts, and ultimately those lending practices that are in the contract, if it's simple interest, it better match up. You better be rebating your interest to your customer correctly. And I think everybody in here would all say this. Is there anybody in here that doesn't think their software is doing it correctly?
Good. That's good.
Well, how do you know?
Yeah.
I mean, not even my customers know. So how do you know? So I would say assume nothing. Go back and look at your systems and look at how well they're doing things and assume nothing. Do regular audits, and because ultimately, it's not that software provider's ultimate liability. You're protecting yourself and your family.
Yeah. And just because the contract's working for somebody else, let's say you're in Texas, well, your disclosures and the way you're doing things is totally different than the way somebody's doing in Louisiana. So you can't just adopt other people's documents. You really need to be sure that you're being compliant within your own business model and your own operation. So I think we've concluded that capital is an important component, compliance is an important component, cash flow is an important component, and certainly your systems and technology are absolutely essential elements. Having a good financial operation is an important component. So there's a lot of different aspects. It's a lot more than just seeing how many cars you can sell. Buy here, pay here is about you can sell yourself out of business rather than to sell yourself into success in this business because of the capital. Which brings us to the next point. Why do you need a business plan to be successful in the buy here, pay here business? When you start in the business, or when you've been in business for a period of time, one of the most important things that you can do is figure out what business model you're going to follow. In the buy here, pay here business is how much money you're going to put on the street. In other words, if you're going to sell vehicles that cost you $10,000, you're going to put twice as much money on the street as somebody who's going to put vehicles out that are $5,000 in cost. So you have to understand how you're going to position your model and what resources that you have to work with. And the only way I know to do that is to project it out, to answer the basic questions. How many vehicles do I want to sell? How many What price do I want to sell them at? What's my down payment going to be? How much is my cost and deal? How much money am I going to spend on reconditioning cost? All of those questions have to be answered before you open the doors. Otherwise, you're just going to be slinging paper out there, and you're not going to be able to expect a consistent result. So your business model is a critical element, and that comes from your basic business plan. Things are changing all the time, so you have to tweak your business model. You have to look and see what changes are taking place in your community. Is income decreasing? Are people having more problem coming up with a down payment? How are they handling the repayment? How's the cost of the vehicle working? How much markup can you really have and get customers to pay it? Can you keep a term under your contract that works because the car is going to run that long? Those are all considerations that you have to face when you're putting your business model together. So over the years, people have said to me, Ken, what's the magic formula? What's the silver bullet? What's the secret sauce? How do you do this? And why are there different business models? Well, the real difference in this business is cash and deal. It's how much money that you're willing to risk and put on the street decides what type of business model you have. Everybody tends to come into the business and try to get a less expensive car so they can put more vehicles out there. But oftentimes that isn't the smartest thing to do, because the best customers don't want the worst vehicles. So you've got to find a good relationship between the type of vehicles that you're selling and the customers that you're trying to sell them to, and match the two. So that comes as your business model, your business plan, focusing on logistics of your area, studying it, and see what your market really needs.
Another thing that they might want to consider is, are any of you in 20 groups? Okay, that's one of the best things you could do.
Excellent point.
20 groups. Ken has some analytics that he provides that are benchmarks. Most of you don't know where you need to be, so benchmarking, I think, is really important. And one thing a 20 group does for you is it really focuses you in on benchmarking and focusing on the right things. What should your overhead be? Right. Not everybody knows what their overhead should be. How much cash and deal should I have? Right. What's the average down payment? NIADA, I think, provides some of those statistics as well. I think those are all good metrics for you to try to work with. And the good thing about 20 groups is you got a group of people in there that hold you accountable.
Right.
And they're pretty harsh. Their job is to criticize every single thing you're doing and try to make you better. And your job's to do the same thing.
And how do you select the right 20 group? What you need to do is line up an opportunity to go and visit a potential group. And the key is finding other dealers that are in that group that are going to be similar to what you're doing, and so that you can draw on their knowledge, you can draw on their experience, because it's much cheaper for your competitor to make a mistake than it is for you to make a mistake. So we can all learn from each other and benefit by it. Well, how do you develop a good business model? I think we touched on that a few minutes ago. You project it out. You answer the question about how much capital it's going to take, what resources it's going to take, what technology should you consider. GPS technology is certain. I've said before that if you've been in the business for less than 5 years, it ought to be mandatory that you're using these types of devices, either starter disabling devices, which some people use, particularly when it's difficult for your customers to pay in accordance with the agreed upon contracts. If you're finding that they're always delinquent, they always pay at their own pace, then disabling devices do a great job. If, on the other hand, it's about finding the vehicle after they don't pay and recovering it quicker and being able to mine more out of it, then GPS technology is a great way to go. But we've done 3 studies on these, and what we found by people that use them and have had experience with them, that they're working and they're cost beneficial, and they really provide a benefit in terms of making you more efficient and making you more able to do more with less collectors, less personnel that are having to do all the day-to-day chores, because technology is clearly a way to make you more efficient.
Are any of you considering lease here, pay here versus buy here, pay here?
Leasing? Anybody?
Anybody consider
Doing
leasing?
Leasing or thinking about it? Anybody?
Well, that's something that we hear a lot about these days in the industry. A lot of people are considering going into leasing versus traditional buy here, pay here. Well, if I started off as a buy here, pay here dealer and eventually I wanted to transition to leasing, it would probably be important that my carrier, my software provider, have some sort of tool for that so that I could transition my business into that or potentially support both paradigms simultaneously. So, when you buy a piece of software, it's not about the cost. That's the worst evaluation you can do. Never, ever buy software based on cost, ever. Mine or anybody else's. Okay? Buy software based on what you think your capabilities are, and ultimately what you're paying for is what you're going to get out of it. Because at the end of the day, when you go to these 20 groups, they're going to expect you to provide great reports. If you don't have great reports, they're not going to want you in their 20 group.
And your capital provider's not going to want you either.
That's right. And your capital provider may actually force you to change systems, which is another disruption. So buy a good system. Do your homework. Doesn't matter whose it is, just pick the right one for your situation. Now, if your plan is to have 100 accounts, your requirements may not be quite as much as if your plans are to have 5,000. So, and everybody starts off at 1. But where you end up is ultimately, how far you think you can take that thing. And when you get to the 200, 300, 400 accounts or 500 accounts, and you're having to manage a collection staff, and you're having to manage recovery, and you're having to manage, the aspects of losses and all that, and provide Ken with the data that he needs for maybe doing a subprime analytics report on you, it's going to be very important that those systems capture enough data to be able to give that kind of information back out to whatever provider you need.
Yeah, store the data. I think, some of you may be wondering, well, look, if I can get a system for this amount of money, why should I pay this amount of money? Aren't they all the same? Aren't we just, basically worried about contracting the customer and storing the data in this computer system? No, we don't, because the better systems of today are evolving to provide a more total solution. They integrate with GPS devices and payment technology. They're automated, and so the software integrates together to make it efficient to use those. Another thing, I think the term buy here, pay here is going to disappear over the next few years. I don't think there is going to be a buy here, pay here business as we know it. I think it's going to be buy here, pay anywhere is really what we're going to see. And what I mean by that is that we're trying to get more people to pay, the most efficient way, whether it be by a credit card or a pay portal. Alan, tell them about what pay portal technology you've interfaced into AutoStar and how that's affected your customers.
Electronic payments, they're really important today. Your customer, almost all of them have some sort of debit card that they carry around. A lot of them are being paid that way these days. And everybody wants to pull out their Visa card. They're not going to want to say they don't have something like that. So whether it's a non-bank customer or a bank customer, they all have those cards. So finding convenient ways for them to pay you is really important. And there's a lot of anonymity behind those cards. One of the reasons dating websites are so successful is because you don't have to see them to talk to them.
That's right.
I mean, it's true. It's a fear. What do you think? You think your customers are afraid of you? They are. They're afraid of you. They're afraid that you're going to take something from them. So, but guess what? When I go on the internet and I can get anywhere and I can make my payment online and I don't have to talk to anybody, that's pretty cool. And so finding automated ways and finding ways to take their money, whether it be on a recurring situation or whether it be on a one-time situation. But the one thing I also would consider is in this space, and anybody that's doing buy here, pay here has been doing as long as you have knows that accountability is everything. And if you take a commitment from somebody, you take a promise to pay from them, you expect them to pay it, right? Out of curiosity, what is that about? Is that a 50-50 thing for you, or is it pretty much? No. Like you call somebody on the phone and they say, "I'll be in on Friday." Do they 100% of the time show up on Friday? Is it 50-50, 60-40, 70-30? You're very fortunate. The majority of people in bigger markets, okay, it's roughly a 50-50 proposition for those folks. Ken and I were just having this conversation because he deals with this all the time. And what you'll find out is if you were to tie an electronic payment technology in with your promise to pay or sets or whatever you want to call them, commitments, your promise to pay statistics will go up dramatically. So if you tell a customer, listen, we're going to let you pay, we're going to let you pay over these next 3 payments, you're going to pay 100, 200, or whatever it is, and you actually set those up and then match a electronic payment mechanism with that, then there's a couple good things that happen. One, you get your money, usually. And two, the second good thing is your collectors aren't wasting time working on accounts that have already made those commitments.
Right. From an internal control standpoint, think about it, the money's gone directly from your customer into your bank account without your people having to handle it or process it. So from an internal control standpoint, it's much more efficient and effective. Let me tell you one of the negatives of electronic payments, because I really want to emphasize this. In buy here, pay here, you've trained your customers to pay at the lot, you're seeing them all the time, so you're developing the bond with the customer, and you're seeing the collateral presumably, and maybe even keeping current that they've moved or changed their phone number. All those things are important. But when you set them up on an electronic pay portal, you don't see them anymore. All you see is their payment. Until one day you come in and the guy's made 6 payments as agreed, and all of a sudden the bank advises you that there wasn't sufficient funds in there to clear. So if you haven't been keeping up with where the customer is or what changes has been in his his location or his phone number or whatever, you've lost touch with him. So that's where GPS technology comes in. So I urge you that if you're using pay portals, to integrate the GPS technology in so you don't lose track of the customers. AutoStar integrates with the GPS devices. So you've got it there. You've got the pay portal and you've got the GPS technology, but you find that in the less expensive systems, they don't have that kind of integration. So when you want to do multiple things, you're doing it less efficiently, and therefore it can cost you more money. And you need to consider those things as you get into it. But getting the money into your bank account as quickly with as few people handling it as possible should really be one of your goals. I mean, it should absolutely be one of your goals. So let's talk about personnel for a minute. Where do you find the right personnel? There's a couple schools of thoughts in the industry, and I'll just throw these out to you. There's some people that we've seen that don't want to hire somebody who's been with a competitor or have experience. They say that their minds are poisoned with that experience because they bring with them a mindset, and that may not be the mindset that you want to have in your own business. So maybe you're better off to start from scratch and train them the way you want things done. On the other hand, experience is a great teacher. So bringing people in that have experience but that are coachable is a good thing as well. Now, what industries have transferable skills? The rent-to-own industry has transferable skills. We see a lot of people coming out of the rent-to-own business who manage stores coming in and becoming managers in the buy here, pay here business, because think about it, the rent-to-own business has some of the same characteristics that we have. In the collection end, look for people that maybe got laid off out of a big credit company or a bank or a financial institution where they had collection responsibilities, and bring some good background and experience with them. Alan, what have you seen work well with some of the personnel you work with?
Golly. Well, I have a whole methodology on that.
Okay, good.
I call it hire slow, fire fast.
Okay.
And, really, at the end of the day, what you want to do is make sure you hire people with, I'm going to use something I learned recently from a person I've been working with by the name of Jim Jackson. I don't know if y'all know who he is. He's a national speaker and kind of a motivational kind of guy, but he does individual coaching as well. And you want to hire people with your same value system. Now, that's an interesting word, okay? The people that work around you, they have to have the same value system you have as it relates to work. And if they don't, you're going to find all kinds of people to interview. Don't hire them, because ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to grow frustrated with them, and you're going to end up terminating them anyway. And they're going to cause so much disruption in your business, you're going to constantly working around them, try to fix all the things that they're doing. The reality is you can't fix anybody. So you need to find people that want to work for you and that think the way you think. Because if you don't, ultimately that's a bad situation. And I would say that there is more. That's why I started off when I was talking at the very beginning about hiring the right people, because there are more mistakes made in hiring than anything I see. They hire, they hired the accounts payable girl at the bank, and she's now going to be their controller. Well, she did accounts payable, which just basically means that she was able to code a transaction. Doesn't mean she knows anything about reconciling financial statements or providing a quality balance sheet or income statement to a lender or somebody else. So don't make those mistakes. Hire people that are qualified, that can actually help you, but most importantly, hire people that have your value system, whatever that is. So if you were to sit down and write down the top 3 things that you think are important to you and the type of person you want, what is your value system, and hire that kind of person. Because ultimately, that's the only people that you're going to be satisfied with at the end anyway.
I think there's 3 people that for sure have to be in every successful buy here, pay here operation. You have to have a good attorney who understands the business and help you stay compliant and keep up with all the disclosure regulations. So we know you need a good attorney. I think you need a good CPA, somebody that understands your business, because I can tell you that there's all kinds of special elections that you can make that'll save you millions of dollars in taxes, but you have to know to make them. And the IRS is betting on the fact that you won't know, that you won't have any idea how to make those elections, and your accountant won't know either. And so God bless you, because you're just going to overpay your taxes, and we need more people overpaying their taxes, they say. So the reality is, if you want to overpay your taxes, hire somebody who doesn't know anything about the business, doesn't know anything about the elections, because he'll help you miss all those elections, but you can't retract, because you have to file for a change of accounting and get approval from the IRS. So you got to have a CPA that understands your business. The third thing I think that you need is a good financial partner, whether it be a bank, whether you have a big investor that's putting the money in, but it's important that he understands the business and that you set up monitoring to report to him so he understands what your progress is. We know this isn't a perfect world, and the reporting in the business, we report income on a sale before it's collected in buy here, pay here. That's called the tax on phantom income, because not all those paper profits turn into cash. So that's why you can be misled by thinking you're doing better than you really are, because you're seeing all this paper profit come in, and if it doesn't turn into cash, you really don't have it. So we need a good attorney, we need a good accountant, and we need experienced people who can help you implement things properly, and we need a good financing partner. And you've got to, your responsibility as you go back is to inspect what you expect. Everybody needs to understand what their responsibilities are, and you've got to make sure that they happen. And Alan, do you see that in every operation you work with, people checks and balances and all those kinds of things?
No, normally there's not enough systems
That's right.
in place internally, so
That's
yeah,
right.
I agree with that.
You know, I spoke to a group of 20 of the largest buy here, pay here dealers in the nation, and the sad thing I'd have to say to you is I asked, the first question is, how many of you have an internal audit department? Not one of them raised their hand. Yet, on a Friday, they'll take in more money than any bank in town. And every one of those banks has an internal audit department to check on everything, but not one of them had an internal audit function. So what message does that send to your employees? Hey, if we screw up, who's going to catch us anyway? You know, so we're not really focusing on how to impress upon our people that they've got to be on top of their game. It's not about doing it, it's doing it right. And so it's very, very important that you have, you know, checks and balances in your operation, because there's a lot of cash going through it. That's your responsibility. And also the attitude that you project as an owner. If you're spending all your time on the golf course, you know, the chances are your employees, you know, are taking liberties as well. You're sending the wrong message to them. This is not a business that you can manage from the outside looking in. Nothing is the way it seems in buy here, pay here. It's always something different. And so you have to be able to really see what's going on, and that takes a hands-on approach. At my second show at NABD, one of the best operators in the business came up to me and he said, Ken, I enjoyed the show. I said, well, Bruce, thanks for coming. I respect you. I know you've got a great operation. He said, well, let me tell you something, son. He said, I'll come back here, but I want you to know that there's the most important thing I can tell you as you go forward. There's only one thing that's real in buy here, pay here. That's cash, and everything else is an illusion. And I've always remembered that. And that's some of the best advice I could give you. Follow the cash. Follow the cash. Because if it doesn't get into your bank and it's going someplace else, it's not helping you. So the reality is follow that cash. So where can you get more information about the buy here, pay here industry? Right here. NIADA, coming to conferences like this. Your state association. They play a vital role in educating you as to what you're doing in your state, in your locality. So you've got to be on top of your game. So I view it this way. Your local and your state dealer association, NIADA, and any specialized training that you need are like 3 legs on a stool. And if any of those legs isn't there, the stool's wobbly and you're missing something. So use your state association. Be active in it. Draw on them to help you know what you're supposed to be doing. If you don't have an active dealer association, get behind it and make it happen. We need the states. My dream, my hope is, as the CFPB comes in, that they're going to push the regulatory compliance down to the state level, because there's no way we can teach those regulators what they need to know. They have no relationships. They have no knowledge of what you do. And we're not going to be able to teach them that in 3 months. So if they're going to regulate us without understanding our business, we're really going to be in trouble. So my hope is that the years that we've worked with the state regulators, that some of that's going to flow down and those working relationships are going to help. Well, the state dealer associations are key to building those relationships. So if you're not active in your state association, you're missing it. Now, compliance-wise, there's publications like Tom Hudson puts out, like Car Law, that you should be subscribing to that so you know what to be compliant. You ought to have a local attorney that's giving you information all the time, keeping you updated. You've got to be reading every automotive publication. If you're not subscribing to Used Car News, if you're not getting Auto Remarketing, if you're not getting Dealer Magazine from NIADA, if you're not getting Subprime Auto Finance News, shame on you. Because guess what? I've got good news. All of them are free. All you got to do is just put your name on the list and take a few minutes to read them to see what's going on. And guess what? Now there's other publications like Automotive Digest has a weekly and daily kind of web update, so you don't have to read through everything. It gives you a condensed version and keeps you apprised. So use the internet to keep up with things. But we know you can't come to every conference. We know that you can't be every place at one time, but it's your responsibility, it's your job to go out and find out what's going on. So don't say that you don't know, I didn't know that, and figure that's going to be a defense. When the regulators come in and take a look at your business, ignorance is no defense. It's a crime, and they're going to make it that way. So the reality is it's your job to be on top of your game. Alan, do you want to add other things?
Oh, I've got...
You do training too.
Oh, I've got plenty of things on that. We have our own conference ourselves for our users that come every year. And we think it's so important this year, we're doing 2.5 days of nothing but compliance. We have an entire track that's dedicated to nothing but compliance. Compliance is going to be huge. One thing I want to add to what he said was there's something called Counselor Law Library,
Great.
Which is an online resource that you can subscribe to from Hudson Cook. It's like $1,000, I believe, for the combination of Carl. I don't know exactly for a state-specific database. It's a very good database.
Yep.
And it gives you a lot of great information. You can just type in keywords and look up information and read kind of a simple version of the law. And if you want to drill in and look at more complicated stuff, you can do that as well. But, you know, I can tell you, I'll give you an example. We have a dealer in the state of Arizona. I'm not going to mention his name, okay? But this particular dealer, we had told this dealer more than once he needed to quit doing something he was doing on his contracts. And we believed so much about it that we actually made him sign a document saying that we don't agree with what you're doing. We don't think you should be doing this. We'll program it anyway to do that. Well, recently he received a letter from an attorney, and it happened to be 2 letters. That's how they come. They come in pairs for two different consumers, and he's got a potential issue that may lead to a class action claim against him. And the reason is because it's merely a statutory claim, meaning that the disclosures in the Fed box, the way he wanted some information disclosed in the Fed box, the federal box, that's that big black box on your contracts, he wanted it disclosed a certain way, and it dealt with deferred down payments, pickup payments, quick notes, whatever you want to call them. They're bump payments. There's a whole bunch of different words for it, but they're all the same thing, but he wanted those disclosed a certain way. Now here's the bad news. The consumer was not harmed. There was no consumer violation. There was no overcharge. There was no anything. But now he's potentially in a class action lawsuit with punitive damages that potentially could bankrupt him. He employs about 50 people, and now he's got to fight this lawsuit.
Yeah, that's
So,
a good example.
and there's nothing, he didn't do anything wrong, per se. All he did was violate a statutory rule. And this is what I mean. You've got to educate yourself. Don't take anything for granted. They don't care about you.
So then, what mistakes must you avoid? And I think, Alan and I have tried to touch on some of the major ones. Not having enough capital, that's certainly a problem. Not having the right team of professionals to work with, well, that's a problem. Not having the right technology in your business, whoops, that's a problem. Not focusing on the fact that you're in the finance business, not really the car sales business, whoops, that's a problem. And not paying attention to cash, how much cash is in your business, and letting you look at those financial statements that show all those paper profits, but you never have a dime in the bank and you're overdrawn, that's a problem. Should you be, yeah, go ahead.
Why don't you add something about, we were talking recently about the whole idea of a related finance company and a dealership, and the commingling, what kinds of issues, because you have a lot of expertise in that area.
Well, I think the big thing that Alan's referring to is that you never get anywhere by overpaying your taxes. It doesn't make you a better citizen, doesn't make you exempt from an IRS audit, it just makes you broke. So the reality is you're never going to get anywhere by overpaying your taxes. The reason we have a related finance company is so that those paper profits are matched with the actual cash that you're collecting by selling your contracts over to your own finance company, discounting it, which reduces that front-end profit and keeps you from having to pay tax before you actually have the cash. Now, I know I've said a mouthful, but at the end of this thing, I'm going to give you all my business cards and say, look, if you can't get the answer to something, you don't know something, you want to ask me, you don't have to be my client, give me a call, send me an email, and I'll try to help you and get the right answer. So that's a post-conference guarantee. And I want to make sure that you structure your business so that you're not overpaying your taxes, because we talked about how capital intensive the business is, and if you overpay your taxes, you're really starting with a tremendous disadvantage.
But those transfers can't just be paper transfers, and
Correct.
you can't treat these two companies as one company.
Correct.
And repossessions have to be treated as fair market value assets that you determine what they're worth, and
Correct.
all those things. Those are the issues that I was talking about as it relates to all the audit stuff you used to do.
Right.
And
Right. Well, what Alan's saying is that a related finance company is often the biggest deduction you'll have in your tax return, but you have to do it right, and it's technical. And if you go back to your accountant and you say, hey, I learned at NIADA I ought to have a related finance company, and he says, well, I don't know what that is, or I don't think you can do that, or that's against the law, you need to start looking for another accountant, because he's not familiar with your industry and your business. And our last point is, how much capital you need? Well, that's where the projection comes in. That's where the business model comes in. You're going to need a lot more money if you're selling a higher-end vehicle. You're going to need less money if it's a lower-end vehicle. And if you stretch the term out, longer, your cash is going to come back to you, presumably slower. So you need to think about that. When you say, look, I'll sell it with no down payment, and you're putting $5,000 or $6,000 to buy the vehicle, think about how much more risk that you're taking. So again, follow the cash. Follow the cash. Is when you decide to do something, evaluate what's the cash impact of what you're doing. Alan, any comments on that, on capital?
Well, the cash is very important.
Sure.
I mean, I've seen dealers that I have a customer that we transitioned from another system that they used to think it was acceptable that their cash position at the end of the month was out $20,000.
Sure.
And so their cash draw reconciliations throughout the month would accumulate to be such a point that it might be $20,000 or $15,000 out. But when you're talking about millions, 20,000 seems kind of immaterial. But one of the things that we did to teach them, and I'm going to tell you, no matter what size you are, your cash needs to be reconciled every single day. It needs to balance to the penny. It may seem obvious to you, but somehow these things can get out of whack. And a lot of that had to do with the way their system worked and the process that they put in place. But he's right. Put good systems in place from day one, internal systems for managing cash, managing those collections, and making sure those deposits are accurately recorded in your bank.
Well, what we've tried to impress upon you in the last couple of days and here today, that it's not rocket science to be successful in this business, but it is a science. And there are ways to do things, and you have to really get on top of the changing environment that we're in. You've got to come to meetings like this. You've got to network with people. You've got to get the education. You've got to hire the right people. You've got to have the right team before you get into it. And I just want to encourage you to do all those things because we want to see you all succeed. We want to see you be successful. Whether you've been in the business for 14 years or 14 minutes, you still have the same challenge, and that is, how are you going to be successful going forward? And we want all of you to be successful. So I want to thank you all for attending this session.